Okay. You just clicked it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have to behave now.
Yes, Bob says we have to behave, everyone. Okay, because now we're recording. So, I have to be good. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Can we get some reactions? Great. Thank you guys. So welcome to the New York State School Counselor Association uh, professional the Professional Development Committee series. And today we are presenting on something that is extremely important and something that I believe that everyone has been, privy to in their schools or outside their schools. So we're talking about suicide prevention, everyone. We're talking about what that looks like and how you can learn from someone who's in the field doing this, right? A lot of counselors are telling me now, like the mental health concerns are really getting to a really crazy rate, right? So we have Gabe Lopez here, who is going to talk to us about his journey in learning how to prevent suicide and what that looks like in everyone's schools. Gabe is an amazing person. He has been doing this for some time. Um, I I've been able to converse with him, and I'm really looking forward to what he can say to you guys and all the things that you can pick up from him. So, without further ado, I'll introduce Gabe Lopez. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you for having me. My name is Gabe Lopez. I am a psychotherapist in New York City. Um, I started my mental health field work, working on a few different crisis hotlines and working with suicide prevention in a very direct way with callers calling in who were feeling in crisis, sometimes feeling suicidal ideation, sometimes having active plans, sometimes having more passive situations. And then later, when I became a psychotherapist, I had a real passion for this work and this topic. And so have worked now with clients and I've had the opportunity to work with clients on a longer term basis around some of these feelings and thoughts and experiences. And so this is a passion of mine. I think I will also share that part of this passion and part of this work and how I got started in suicide prevention was through my own experience of feeling suicidal as a high school student and later having the opportunity to reflect on some of the things that went really well as part of that experience for me and some of the things that maybe could have gone better. And so I'm really glad to have the opportunity to present to you all specifically today as counselors working with young students experiencing this challenge. So if we can get the slides up, I just want to start off with some learning objectives. I'm planning for about 45 minutes of content, and then I do want to open things up to some Q&A. I won't be checking the chat during the presentation portion.
I'll be on the chat. Hi, everyone.
Um,
Michael Gardner here. Sorry, Gabe.
Perfect.
I did not say that, but I will be checking the chat and I'll be posting on there. Any questions that everyone has, you can just direct it to the chat until the Q&A at the end.
Perfect.
Thanks, Gabe.
Mhm. And then at that point, we can read questions from the chat, and then I'll also invite folks to just come on and unmute themselves and share. And are we good with slides?
Sorry, Gabe. Give me just a moment here. I might have to leave the room and come back. I'm so sorry. Give me just a moment to
Okay,
try that out.
cool.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, great. So if we can just kind of start with some learning objectives. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about recognizing the key signs of suicidality, how to kind of identify when someone is experiencing that, and sort of explore some of the differences between and having a better understanding of suicidality, work through some myths about suicidality, looking at how to have conversations in a way that feels useful, intentional, avoids doing further harm, some practical steps to take. I know that we have specific protocols to follow, and so I want to give you tangible sort of takeaways to be able to do that in a way that's most effective and utilizes a lot of kind of relational and just safe work. We'll talk about hospitalization and when that's appropriate. And of course, I want to talk about how to take care of yourself through all of this. And I will give you some resources that you can share with your students who may be experiencing this suicidal ideation. So we'll dive into just understanding suicidality. Why do people feel suicidal? And the first reason for that, a huge reason for that, is feeling out of control of someone, out of control of their life, out of control of a specific situation, a circumstance, or several circumstances sort of coming together and just not really seeing a way out, not seeing a way for things to change, for things to get better. And one of the things that I always like to really clarify with folks is that suicidality is so much less about wanting to die and much more about wanting it to end, right? And so when we think about the idea of being out of control and not being able to kind of see a way out of your situation, oftentimes what I will explore with folks is being able to think about, well, what would suicide give you, right? What would dying give you? And that's another thing that I want to kind of talk a little bit more about later is really how to have those conversations. But a way out, rest, an ending to the things that they're experiencing, to the pain that they're experiencing is something that I hear a lot. So let's go into some of the myths about suicidality. If I bring it up, I can make someone suicidal. A lot of times folks feel uncomfortable about asking the question directly because they feel like they don't want to sort of plant the idea. This has never really happened. If someone is in this place of wanting to end their life, wanting things to end, they're already there. And if they're not, they are able to tell you that, but it's not something that someone sort of passively arrives at or is just like, hey, that might be a great idea. Let me try. It's typically a lot more thought out, a lot more felt. Someone's in a really sort of critical and emotional place when they're reaching this point of suicidality. So asking the question, do you want to kill yourself? Are you feeling, you know, like you want to end your life? If someone's not feeling that way, they're able to communicate that pretty clearly. If someone hears about someone else's feelings of suicide, they will become suicidal too. Again, kind of going along with that first concept, right? It's not something that can just be planted. Now, if someone experiences someone else's suicide, that is different and approached differently because it is a death, it's a big emotional event, right? And so we look at that from that perspective and really understanding the emotional impact. But if someone else is feeling suicidal, it's not something that sort of vicariously spreads. It's possible to make suicidal ideations worse by talking about them. Again, folks are really afraid to have conversations about this because they think that, you know, saying one word or saying something wrong might push someone sort of over the edge into suicidal ideation or deepening that suicidal ideation from, passive to active or something like that. Again, if we're talking about it, if we're naming it in a way that is allowing somebody to explore it, to vocalize it, a lot of times that's really useful. And if you're hearing about it, on some level, there's a part of them that wants help, right? Or else you wouldn't be hearing about it. And that was the thing that I always remembered when I was thinking about callers on the hotline is like they called in, right? They're sharing this with me. And there's a reason that they're sharing this with me, even if they don't see a way out. There's a reason that they're sharing this with me because maybe on some level they want help. And that's the part that we sort of lean into is, they're sharing it. And so on some level, there's this desire for connection and to be seen and maybe to be helped. All self-harm is suicidal in nature. I won't have a chance to get as deep into self-harm today, but it is not necessarily directly related if someone is cutting, if someone is injuring themselves, that they are feeling suicidal. Self-harm is often another way to think about ways in which they can take back control, right? So in some ways, it's sort of can be kind of a preemptive effort before suicidal ideation, before they think about the end as sort of the ultimate way to kind of make something stop. But when things are feeling out of control, what do? We look for the places that we have control. And we all sort of do this in our own way, right? If you're feeling like your personal life is kind of spinning out, what do? You lean into work life, right? Because that's the thing that you can sort of manage, control, attend to. And so when we think about self-harm, if they are creating pain, it's a thing that they control. They control when, they control how much. And so that is how sort of self-harm is kind of processed, is the idea of there's not a lot that I get a say in, this is one thing I do. And so working with self-harm is often working with how do we help folks find a way to kind of feel in control of something. So how do we begin to kind of notice when someone is suicidal? A lot of times you will first hear from teachers or other education professionals. And so I wanted to just go over a little bit about some of the things that may be coming up in classrooms. Changes in social engagement, right? If we're seeing somebody who's generally very social, is really connected, all of a sudden starting to be much more isolated, much more quiet, in and of itself, cause for exploration, not necessarily immediate suicidal ideation, right? But this is one of the pieces of it. Academic performance, of course, we know that when grades drop or change, that there's probably something going on, something worth exploring. Prolonged exposure to bullying, family conflict, any big sort of chronic stressors. These are types of situations, right, where folks don't see a way out. If they're at home and family is feeling really tumultuous, well, that's their home, right? That's where they always have to go back to. And there's not really a way to make that easier often. And so that can kind of come up. Evidence of self-harm, we've talked about self-harm being a sort of preemptive step to try and control things, right? And so if we're seeing self-harm or noticing scars, scratches, things like that, that can be a sign. Substance use, this is a tricky one, right? Because we know that there's exposure to substance use in general. But like, if we think about changes in substance use, if someone we know that they're drinking or smoking marijuana in kind of a different way than they normally do, kind of looking at that. And so individually, are those all necessarily connected to suicidality? Not necessarily. In combination, things worth exploring. So now let's think about when they're actually in your office. What are some things that we can look for? Expressions of apathy, ways in which, it doesn't matter anyway. What's the point? Again, not seeing a way out, talking about things not getting better, feeling sort of more emotionally withdrawn. If you have a very strong relationship with the student and all of a sudden there's more sort of shutdown, a lack of communication, it's probably a sign that they're turning inward, that they're feeling like whatever they're doing externally isn't working. So we have some signs of suicidal ideation. How do we begin to explore this? How do we begin to assess for it? The first thing that's really, really important is to ask directly. Do you want to kill yourself? Do you ever think about wanting to kill yourself? We want to avoid using coded language to talk about this. And this is something that's really uncomfortable for folks. But when we're assessing for suicidal ideation, we want to get a really clear yes or no. And we don't even want to ask, are you suicidal? Because depending on what folks have heard about suicidality, depending on what exposure to media they've consumed, definition of suicidality can be really different as an adult versus as someone who is just being exposed to something that looks like suicidality, right? Maybe that can be self-harm and they think that's associated with suicidality. So we want to really kind of get a direct question. Are you thinking about killing yourself? If yes, if the answer is yes, we want to understand how seriously are they considering it? Do they have a plan for how they would do it? Do you know how you would kill yourself? Do you have access to the way that you are thinking about killing yourself? So if someone says, you know, I am thinking about taking a bunch of pills and their family has pills in their medicine cabinet that they can use to take, right? They have access to those. If someone says, I'm thinking about using a gun, but there's no access to gun, that's a really different situation, right? And then intent. So how soon are we thinking about this? Do you have a place and time? Oftentimes when I was working in crisis settings, I would ask, you know, when are you thinking about doing this? Do you think about when? Often you'll hear things like when I'm alone, when my parents aren't home, at nighttime. And that's when we want to really understand, you know, is it tonight? Is it tomorrow? Is it, I've thought about potentially when I'm alone, but don't really know when that is. Assessing for suicidality and asking these questions leads to some really vulnerable responses, right? So we want to always continue to be relational in our work. We want to provide a lot of positive affirmation and reinforcing these things. Oftentimes it's really hard to share things. It's a really emotional experience saying that you want to kill yourself because it's not really talked about, right? It's often stigmatized in a really big way. And so thinking about thanking them for sharing that and really validating that what they're sharing is okay, that you want to hear it, you want to know. We want to know about previous attempts. Have they ever tried to kill themselves before? Have they ever, you know, started to engage in a plan and had it not work? What was that like for them? We really want to avoid using discouraging language, right? Someone already, if they're reaching this place of feeling suicidal, they feel out of control of their life. And so if we as a person who are asking these questions then start to say things like, well, you know, that's wrong, you know, you can't do that, we're taking away control. We're taking another thing from them that is not possible. And so we want to, again, be willing to kind of go there, right? And I think this is the difference. Even in psychotherapy, we often think about, you know, how immediately jumping into protocol, and we'll get there. But first, we want to just show that we're open and curious and able to be willing to hear why. What would What would killing yourself give you? What would get better? Because then we can start to look for, you know, are there ways that things can get better, right? We start to unearth situations that we may otherwise not have known about. So we've assessed, we've understood. What are the next steps? Well, we know that we have reporting protocols. Those are very, standardized, and so sometimes it can feel very daunting to figure out how to do that in a way that doesn't create additional harm. And so the way that we do that is by giving as much control to the student or the person who's feeling suicidal as possible. We want to explain what needs to happen, why they need to happen, right? We need to call your parents. They're responsible for you. Your guardian, they're responsible for you. They need to know. We need to, inform other school administrators. It's really important. We care about you. They need to know, right? And explain why those things need to happen. Answer any questions, explore concerns, right? What is it like to think about calling your parents? What are you worried that they would say? And then we use a phrase that can be really simple but really empowering is, are you ready? So we know these things need to happen. A way that we give control back to somebody is allowing them to really help you understand when they're ready for it to happen. Yes, I know you need to call my parents. I'm not necessarily ready. I want to talk through this first. Great. Let's talk through that first. We're still going to make that call. We get to make the call. We get to make that decision together. Now they're a part of the process. They're a part of maintaining that control. Think about your relationship with the student. Maybe you have a really close relationship with them. They confide in you. Great. Maybe you are hearing this from a teacher, or the teacher has brought them down because they have told the teacher that they're feeling suicidal. We want to figure out, again, in the interest of giving someone control and safety, who is a safe person that they want to be around for this? Who do they feel trusting of, right? And especially if parents or administrators aren't the people that they feel most safe with, having somebody else in the room that they do feel safe with, that they can just make eye contact with during these next steps is really, really useful. And so whether that's a teacher, whether that's a nurse, any other staff member at the school, right? Being able to just kind of say, yes, you get to have them around for this. This is another way that you can feel empowered in this. And if they don't have a safe person in mind and you're still building a relationship with them, how do you be a safe person? By being willing to go there, by being willing to ask these questions about what it would be like. What do you imagine would be better? What do you imagine would be different? And by really showing that no matter what they're saying, it's okay, and you can hear that and be able to sort of center them in their experience in that moment. When we think about calling a parent or guardian, how do you want me to share it with them? Here's what I have to share. Is there anything about this that you don't want me to share with them? And, use your judgment, right, about what feels appropriate. Maybe there's a situation in which someone is being bullied, but they don't really want their parents to know what it is that they're being bullied about. One of the crisis hotlines that I worked with was the Trevor Project, and so that was a specific focus on LGBTQ youth. And sometimes parents don't know that their child is being bullied for their sexual or gender identity. And if they've confided that to you, it's really important that you check in before sharing that with their parents. And again, allows for this ability to feel empowered and collaborative. We, of course, know that as a school counselor, you're not going to be able to provide all of the mental health support and resources that they'll need during this challenging time. And so that's when you want to come to us as therapists, lean on the resources that are available. If there's a school psychologist, if there's a psychiatric social worker at school? How can they support? What interventions do they offer? And then also just making appropriate referrals again for therapy. So the big question, when do we hospitalize? When don't we? Very often, safety planning is the first and often only step that's needed. In the time that I've been on the crisis hotlines and as a therapist, have never had to hospitalize someone. The only time where hospitalization is really needed is when someone has the means, intent, and plan. They're not willing to safety plan with you. They're not willing to engage. They're just really, really done. And even then, right, we try to create situations in which they can collaborate as much as possible. But most often, you're able to safety plan, just kind of think about, when you're thinking about this plan, is there someone safe that you can talk to? Is there a way that you can distract yourself? What are the ways that are feeling good right now? Can you take a walk? Can you connect with a friend? Can you listen to music? Right? We just want to sort of disrupt that thought process. It's okay for that suicidal thought to come back, but we just want to think about when someone's feeling most suicidal, how can they regulate just to get through that moment, to make it back to you, to make it back to their therapist, to continue to get that support. And so again, self-soothing behaviors, crisis hotlines, just ways in which we can sort of look at things. And, one of the other ways is just to kind of offer something small to look forward to, right? There's a lot of really big things that are feeling out of your control right now. What is something that you can plan for yourself that you can enjoy? Even if it's little, drawing, a favorite snack, really small. Any little bit helps here. We don't want to create promises in these relationships because we want to continue to be a safe person. And if someone comes really close to killing themselves and we've asked them to make us a promise that they're not, they're going to feel less inclined to share that with us the next day. And so we want to avoid keeping our relationship as a means to sort of control them or control the situation, but rather be a place of support to lean into no matter what's happening. So now, how do you take care of yourself? This is all really heavy, right? My hope after this training is that you feel less afraid of working with this topic. I don't expect it to feel easy. It's still not easy for me, especially with folks that we really care about, with people that we've built close relationships with, right? It's really hard to watch someone go through this. It's really hard to show up and hold that emotional space. If you have any sort of personal experience with suicidality or family members who've completed suicide, anything like that, it can bring up a lot. So after that situation, after you've followed protocol, when you're alone, take a minute to just kind of check in with yourself. What are you feeling? What's standing out? And what do you need? Right? Do you have a therapist? Do you have a friend that you can support, that you can seek support from? Colleagues? What are the ways that you can help yourself feel better? And who do you need to talk to? Remind yourself of what you are and what you're not. If someone discloses that they're feeling suicidal, your only job and capacity is to be a safe person and source of support. You are not responsible for somebody else's life. Even as a therapist, we're not responsible for their life. We're responsible to be a safe and supportive figure, to show them that somebody cares, that they can be seen, no matter how ugly it's feeling, no matter how impossible it's feeling. But we're not responsible for saving their life or even necessarily changing the circumstances. Sometimes it's beyond us, right? If it's a family situation, if it's, other factors that we just can't control, we're not responsible for changing that. We're responsible for creating safety and knowing that there's a place that they can come to. And know that, again, you're not alone in this. You can connect with other people, right? Mental health is a very common challenge that comes up in schools. It's why we're having this presentation. Other people have been through it before you. Other people will go through it after you. And so there are sources of support that you can seek out. You can connect with your own therapist about this. And just remember that feelings sort of come in waves, right? Day of, adrenaline's kind of coming in. We might just be in crisis mode. How do I respond? What do I do? And to do things. You know, it might not hit you until a few days later. Whenever it happens, whenever you start to feel the feelings, just know that that's okay. And it's really important to just continue to check in on your feelings and just notice what you need. Sometimes that'll be different depending on the day, right? You may need some alone time one day and you may need some connection the next, and that's okay. But what we don't want is for you to just kind of continue to go about your day just because it didn't hit you on the first day and start to feel these feelings of sort of overwhelm or burnout and recognize that, you know, you haven't attended to this other thing that's come up later. And so now I'll give you some resources. Again, right, these resources also show you that you're not alone in being a source of support for this person. And a lot of times they don't really know that these support resources exist. TeenLine is a great resource that allows folks to connect with a peer who is trained, someone closer to their age, right? If they're in middle school, high school, they can feel connected to somebody who can help them just articulate it and just be seen by someone in their age group in a way that maybe adults can't. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is available. 988 is really easy to remember now. You can call or text. The Trevor Project has a lot of really great resources online for folks. Trevor Space is a space for folks to connect with each other and share experiences. It's moderated, you know, in the sense that it's monitored for safety, but it's a place for social engagement to be able to talk about these things with others, again, in ways that feel less isolating and daunting. And they also offer 24/7 support. The Trans Lifeline is a hotline specifically for folks who identify as trans and are having challenges that are uniquely associated with that experience. The same is true for Blackline. And then I will share my contact info. I am somebody who, again, works with suicidality a lot. And so I'm passionate about it. Here is a source of support. So we moved through that content pretty quickly, quicker than I thought, actually, which is nice because it leaves us open to Q&A. But before we get to some questions, I would love to just hear from some folks if you're willing to just unmute and share. How is all of this landing? How are we feeling?
You could just
Thoughts,
unmute if you'd like to
reactions,
share.
responses? Feel free to just unmute.
I'm just looking at the cool graphic on Dina's
You can unmute.
Screensaver. Looks like a coral reef.
Yeah, it looks like I'm underwater. I like it.
Yeah,
It's
Thank you.
distracting for people like
Good to
me
go.
who can't focus.
Good to go snorkeling.
I would turn on my camera, but I'm in the middle of moving offices, so it's a disaster behind me.
I
I'm
like
so
the
proud of
coral.
you, Gabriel. Um, I was listening, and Gabriel was one of our students here at Woodrow Wilson in LA, an amazing young man, and just hearing you speak was very, I felt proud. And you said you gave some pointers, Gabriel, that I'm processing and I'm taking in, and I appreciate that. And we're never too grown to learn more. So thank you for sharing your experience and everything you've learned from all your schooling. So yes, I'm very proud. I feel like a proud mama or auntie.
Thank you. Hmm.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I
Yes.
just wanted to say thank you for the workshop. It is so needed during this time because there's so much, the mental health is very much on the rise at this time, and a lot of scholars are always expressing about suicidal ideation. So it is needed. So thank you for sharing and just doing this workshop. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Jennifer Thomas. I'm sorry, my camera's off. I'm currently in transition. But thank you, Gabe, for the information. Just wanted to concur with and agree with everyone and just say that the information is very much needed. We think that we are past COVID-19 pandemic and everything that came with that once we were back out in full force. But there's still residuals, especially in the schools. And it's very important for us as school counselors, administrators, faculty, staff to be very vigilant and aware in how it is that we are approaching when assessing for any sort of ideation, especially suicidal ideation. So this was very much needed on our end, and thank you.
I just wanted to say, to be specific, the point about institutionalization was very validating to hear. A lot of my kiddos at the school, they've been institutionalized in one way or another. Well, the kiddos that I work with, and typically they come back to me and it was not a positive experience. It was more harmful than helpful. And I really try to avoid making those kinds of calls when a plan can be put into place with family, community, and the school instead. It was just really validating to hear that. So
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'd love to then thank you so much for everyone who shared. I know a lot of this is still sort of metabolizing and processing, so I'd love to just jump into some Q&A. What questions do we have? What points do we want to sort of need some more expansion? Like me to talk about more?
This is Austin. I wanted to pop in with a question, maybe not so much a direct question, but just I would love to hear more about the clinician side of things. If we are dealing with clients or students or whoever, and we might have our own associations with suicide, personal experience, maybe a loved one. I just want to know more about that because I would imagine there's scenarios in which maybe clinicians might not be the best fit, given talking about suicide might not be something they want to do as a clinician, but I would just love to hear more about that because I'm sure it comes up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think that raises a really great point, right? Is to really in thinking about self-care, part of this is also checking in with, what is your capacity to kind of take this on? If you have personal experiences, if you have um, personal just kind of feelings or challenges about this, how can you, if you need to kind of hand some of this work off, um, sometimes, sometimes you're able to, sometimes you're their point person and safe person. And so just again, kind of what do you need? But just kind of recognizing what are the spaces that you can't go and what do you need around that? And how can you sort of make sure that you can be a safe source of support or person in kind of helping them get to a space where they can kind of talk about and engage with something that might just feel a little bit beyond you, right? Which is okay.
Yeah, I like that, like redirecting.
Hmm.
Sorry, I'm like really got something in my throat. Just redirecting them and making sure that the conversation can still be had,
Hmm.
even though you might not be, the best person for that, like still making sure that it can be had just somewhere else, like resourcing them out.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that's where to, right? Like these hotlines and other spaces are really great resources for folks to be able to have those conversations. And, sometimes are even better resources because they're able to have them in the moment in a way that sometimes they're not able to if they're meeting with you at a scheduled time when, maybe they're not feeling or thinking about those things.
My name's Weston. I have a question. I'm curious, what do you think about like groups or like group work support groups for this kind of thing? Where does that fit in?
Yeah, I mean, I think sources of support and being able to connect with folks who are having different experiences, right? Anytime we're able to feel less alone in an experience, it's always uh, nice. I think the sort of um, caveat or challenge with group work, right, is how to sort of allow for and create spaces to talk about those experiences in a way that feels kind of uh, appropriately facilitated and productive. Um, and just feeling like there's a lot of ability to be seen and heard and validated and kind of understand what they're taking from someone else's experience in mental health settings. A lot of times, especially in on psychiatric units, the primary source of support during their stay is group therapy. And so I think groups can definitely play a really helpful role in that if done correctly.
Hi, Gabe. My name is Maria. First, I want to thank you for the webinar. It was super informative and very important to kind of go over these things again, especially as mental health professionals. That being said, my question is, let's say you have a student who comes in expressing suicidal ideation, and you reach out to their parent or guardian, kind of explaining the situation, and they're not very receptive to the conversation. How would you handle a situation like that? And, what would you do in terms of kind of making the parent feel like understand the severity of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of twofold, right? On one hand, especially if the student is in the room during the conversation with the parent, right? Really taking some time to make sure that that student connects with somebody who is safe, if that's you, if that's, kind of who their identified person is, right? To be able to process how difficult that was to witness, right? And how not just like how not pleasant and how isolating that can feel, and reminding them that their experience is valid, that they're so brave for sharing with you, that they will have sources of support, and that, you will show up to try and help their guardian kind of come to a place of understanding and acceptance. I think parents have a lot of diverse emotional responses to stuff like this, right? And so part of it, then the second part is being able to try and speak to, the student's parent or guardian and just kind of understand more, yes, the severity of it, and also what to do, right? What steps they can take, what they need right now. And again, just coming back to that idea of safety and open communication and support. And maybe, something that can be helpful here is just in kind of planning for those conversations with parents when you plan with the student, thinking about, what's sort of the ideal reaction? What are you hoping for? What are you hoping to get from your parent? How can I help kind of explain and advocate for your needs from them with you? And, also processing and working with, like, what are the reactions that you're hoping don't happen? And how can I support you through that?
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Yeah.
Hi, Gabe. My name is Eddie. I wanted to ask you about what do you think is the best way to approach this subject with middle school students?
Can you say more about what you're thinking about in terms of, are you thinking like proactive education individually?
I think proactive education. I know this is like the month we do a lot of talking to our kids. We've done some stuff, but I wanted to see what other ideas are out there as far as the right way to approach that. And by the way, I just want to say that, I've been doing this for a while, but I sometimes still get nervous about, like, when I'm talking to a kid one-on-one, if I'm doing anything that's going to trigger other things there. So it really helped me at first when you were talking about the myths and things of that sort there. Sometimes even a person like me who's been doing it for a long time needs that reassurance that these things are okay.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that resonated. I think, normalizing that this experience can happen, right? Talking about the experience from a place of helping understand how and why someone gets there, and helping them sort of recognize, if you're feeling out of control, if someone else is feeling out of control, if there feels like there isn't a way out and you start to feel this way, that makes sense. And I can be a safe person, a safe source of support. Here are the other supports that you can reach out to. And so I think just starting with sort of proactively normalizing that someone may get to that place at that, at some point in time. And if and when they do, it's okay to share that with somebody.
Thank you, my friend.
I'm just reflecting on when I worked in a middle school. We used to get most of the referrals for kids with suicidal ideation came from one of their friends. A kid would come in and say, I have a friend, yada yada. And this is what I heard her say. Don't tell her I said it. But I'm really worried about my friend. And then we'd track down the kid and talk to them and, go through the protocol. The other place we got them from was health teachers. They would be doing a lesson or a chapter on mental health or something in the health class. And then all of a sudden we started getting a lot of referrals. The health teachers would come down and refer a kid. You need to talk to this kid, I think, and it's like, well, okay. So those are the two biggest places we got referrals from.
Yeah, I mean, I really resonate with that because I mean, my health teacher was my first point of contact when I was going through that. And it was one of the reasons that, I reached out to her first was because she was sort of the first person to talk about it and to normalize that it was actually an experience that others had. And so I think in those moments, right, when we think about and hear from uh, teachers and just others, even a friend, sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's not, but just kind of encouraging, can you make that initial point of contact instead of saying, here, you need to talk to them. Can we do it together? Can you bring them down, you know, and then the three of us talk? Or like if they've already established this safety, right, building on that safety and empowering them to lean into that safety and know that you're here as a source of support, but part of, again, empowering someone is just kind of following that instinct of, the student trusted the health teacher first. And so how can we then sort of create a warmer handoff or collaboration there?
Any more questions? It would be okay to get done early. You okay with that, Michael? Lost him.
Yeah, that's fine with me. That's it. That's all, folks.
Just going back to so thank you, Gabe. This was terrific. We will be sharing the PowerPoint after I get it from Gabe. I'll link to the recording, and usually the save chats as well, and a certificate of attendance because a lot of people need that. So we'll send it to all the attendees tomorrow. Did this already? Here's our professional development committee. Michael is a co-chair. Gail Reed Mardet is another co-chair, and we have several members from our board. And we have some upcoming webinars. Stay tuned for information. Trauma-informed practice webinar on 11/7. Counselors for computing, talking about more girls in counseling for computing, and that's going to be a good one at on December 17th. So many more will be coming up. I know that Michael and the committee are working pretty hard on this stuff. Anything you'd like to add before we close, Mike?
We also have the update of the counseling regulations throughout the state. I believe that is January 6th, Bob, 7th?
Yeah, graduation requirements. Yeah, January 7th. Yes.
Updated graduation regs for all the school counselors out there. We are having a webinar at the start of the year so that we can make sure that we know what we're doing. I will try to get that that calendar of what we have lined up come to you guys very soon. Just been a lot going on. Another thing, Monday counselor check-ins at 7 p.m. If you guys can make it, if you guys got questions, great. PD committee has a ton of things going on. Please, guys, whatever you need, or if you feel like there's a need out there, please let us know. We also have our annual conference. Bob, we're forgetting about this. Our annual conference is
commercial announcement, yeah.
Our annual conference for New York State School Counseling Association is going to be in Albany, November 21st to the 23rd. There are still rooms available somehow. I think something else ran out though. But yeah, there's multiple hotels in the area that you guys can come to. It's always a really great event, place where as many counselors in New York come far and wide, and there's a lot of resources. Clearly, look at me, I'm a resource, right? Hello. We have so many things happening, guys. So many things happening. The collective care team, which is school nurses, school psychologists, and school social workers. We're banding together so that people know the difference in what we do. We're doing more lobbying days. We're making sure that we hear more from active voices. There may be a podcast somewhere. Stay tuned. All right, Bob. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, here's our conference. It's 27 days from now.
Yes. Woo, woo. Our conference is closed.
The
That was
countdown
our
begins.
president. Huh?
The countdown begins.
Yes.
Yeah, let the countdown begin.
begins.
Yeah,
Listen,
yeah I
guys.
didn't even know we had a countdown clock on here. That's funny.
So, all right. But okay, ladies and gents, it is a pleasure. You guys have my information. You probably seen my face on something. You know how to contact me. See you guys later. Bob, you're the
Thanks,
man, Bob.
Gabe.
Gabe, you were the man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabe.